So we were discussing about the tensile semicircular flap. I'll go into that slightly in detail. This is the original article which Tensile had published in 1977. This is from the original drawings. So here again we are doing a pentagonal kind of excision. We don't do a rectangular because we want a lengthening in this direction. So this amount of triangle is also removed, and the conjunctiva from this part can be used for the canthal area if required. So you don't throw it away, you take the spare part also and keep it. So here through this we'll be doing this is the actual flap. So you get a curved one. This is for the lower eyelid. So you curve it upwards in the periorbital region. You can add a Burroughs triangle if required. Inside, you will be doing the lateral canthotomy and release the conjunctival periosteal tissues also. And this tissue will be moved in. It is sutured. Lateralmost part will be deficient of lashes, but it will be barely perceptible. And when we are doing this suturing, this is to be a little bit careful because we want to maintain the angular contour of the lateral canthus here. So we'll take it as far near and then again far near. This is what Tensile has described. So this should be we should be careful about, so that there is a slight overlap of the upper eyelid onto the lower eyelid and you get a good normal contour in this area. I hope it is clear. Okay, this is from the again from the drawings of Tensile and Stewart. This is for the lower eyelid, like he has shown here, and this is for the reverse direction for the upper eyelid. Okay, these are small semicircular flap, and the content of this flap will be the skin and the orbicularis only. And like Sandeep had described earlier, if you want to go more laterally, you know that the branch of the facial nerve is coming here. So there you have to go more superficially in the temporal area, right? So this is an older gentleman. He has got from the supratarsal fold that has been elevated, some dermochalasis which is there. You know that some involutional changes are there in the eye. So you expect more kind of laxity for the reconstruction. So you do an excision of this pigmented BCC, and then you put the suture on the sides and see how much should come. So even if you're trying to approximate the lid, you can see the tightness. You're not able to approximate in this area. So then you put the Tensile's flap, right? For upper eyelid, you put the semicircular. Starting from the lateral canthus, you put a inverted, you put a U shape, right? And then you bring these tissues laterally along with the lateral canthotomy inside, and then the lash margins are approximated, right? And then you can see that the lateralmost area, there is no lashes, but it will not be perceptible. This is for lower eyelid. When we are doing, you do the inverse direction, right? And here I've used the tarsoconjunctiva also. Sorry that I flipped the picture. This is to show that it is on this side. So tarsoconjunctiva also has been used for the posterior lamellar reconstruction. And then I put the tensile flap here. So this has to be divided. It will be like a lateral tethering will be there, and at the end of 6 weeks, the division has to be done. So the tarsoconjunctival flap has been described first by Wendell Hugh. That was in 1976. This is again his original article. And this was as he has described. What do we take for that? The posterior lamella with the tarsus and the conjunctiva. So you start from the inside, the margin. You go eccentrically according to Hugh, because you don't want to damage the root bulbs of the lashes on the lid margin. And then you go in front of the tarsus, and then at the upper border of the tarsus, we enter into the pre-aponeurotic area, and then you do the recession of the post-aponeurotic area, sorry, the post-levator area. Then you do have to detach the levator and the Muller's muscle from this flap. Why you want to detach the retractors? Because otherwise you will have difficulty in extending this flap to the lower eyelid, one thing. Secondly, the elevator and the Muller's muscle will be pulling on the flap and trying to shorten the dimensions of the flap. So to get a stretch of the tissues, you have to divide these up to the conjunctiva in the upper part also. So this is the tarsoconjunctival flap. And people have described different modifications for the tarsoconjunctival flap also. You can read about that. Q is something which we usually use. It is a transposition of tarsoconjunctiva for upper eyelid like this. So it can be used for the, if lateral part of the tarsoconjunctiva is not there, we can use it as a transposition from the medial remnants of the eyelid. So over that, we can do some skin grafting or you can use some other anterior lamellar flap. Right? Now coming to the lid switch flaps. So lid switch flaps are here what we do is we create the defect and then we are borrowing tissue from the lower eyelid to bring them onto the upper eyelid. Right? It is more like Abbey flap, switch flaps, which we use in the lips. So here we have to create the defect, then we have to define the pedicle. And defining the pedicle can be, it can be a medially based flap or it can be a laterally based flap. So again, I'll come to that. Mustard has given some rules for where to base the flap. Right? And then you are keeping a margin of lower eyelid pedicle here because you know that here there is the marginal artery and marginal artery comes 2 to 3 millimeters from the lash margin. So you want to maintain that marginal arcade in the pedicle. So the skin will be incised to less than 3 millimeters away from the lash margin. On the conjunctival side, you can go a little bit more towards the lid margin, but here outer side you have to maintain this distance. And it is through this pedicle that the blood circulation from the peripheral marginal arcade is coming into the flap. Okay, so from here it will be flipped 180 degrees and it will be sutured to the defect as much as possible. So this is how it will appear after you flip the flap and sutured it onto the upper eyelid. And the defect which is there on the lower eyelid, you will do a lateral canthotomy and you can close it primarily because you know up to 30% of lower eyelid, 1/3 of lower eyelid can anyway be closed primarily. So this much a smaller lid switch flap, if it goes from the lower eyelid, you will be able to close it primarily, right? And then the meticulous suturing will be done and this will be left like that for 6 to 8 weeks. Actually, these pedicles will vascularize in 2 weeks, but when you are shifting the flaps like this, either it is tarsoconjunctival or switch flaps, we usually leave it for a period of 6 to 8 weeks to allow the tissues to stretch so that when we are dividing the flap pedicle, they will not retract back and cause a notching or cause a interning of the free margin of the eyelids. Right? That is the reason why we are leaving this much. The Mustardi rules, so this is a lid switch flap at the completion. You know, looks even more aesthetic than a cutler beard or like a tencel flap because there will be lashes also. It looks almost complete. So the good cosmesis and lash line restoration is one of the advantages. And the scar on the lower eyelids is barely perceptible. Right? And here, Mustard, what he has said about how to transfer the pedicle is that hinge on the same side as the larger remnant of the upper eyelid. Right? If there is a central or eccentrically placed upper eyelid, then you have the option of taking both medial or lateral pedicle. But wherever the larger remnant is, you hinge the pedicle on the larger remnant side. Then second, for central or total eyelid, you hinge it usually on the lateral side. Why you want to hinge it on the lateral side? Because lower eyelid, I'll show in the next slide, we'll be reconstructing with the cheek rotation flap. So you want your switch flap to be on the leading edge of the moving edge of the cheek rotation flap so that it will come more medially. So for that, if it is a central or total eyelid defect, hinge it on the lateral side. And whenever you are doing this, don't include the punctum. Okay, so upper or lower punctum should not be included. You stop short lateral to the punctum. So this is one case of squamous cell carcinoma upper eyelid. So it is almost total eyelid is gone and it is extending, as you can see, into the conjunctival surface also. So we have taken septal mucoperichondria. We've laid the mucosa extra outwards. So this is after the resection has been done on the upper eyelid, and this is the lid switch flap. I'll show the video. So this is the total lower eyelid has been taken, and to this has been pedicled on the lateral side here, right? So it has been flipped on the lateral side, and then for the lower eyelid reconstruction, we are now raising a cheek flap. Okay. Is the video playing?
Yes, ma'am. It's playing.
Yeah. It's playing. It's playing.
Thank you. So this is the same case. So you can see it's a very long total lower eyelid has been flipped. It is laterally hinged on the lateral pedicle. Sorry. And it is on the advancing edge of the cheek rotation flap. Now it is flipped 180 degrees, right? And this is a lash line. So lash line will come below, right? And you suture it like that on the upper eyelid. So you can suture the tarsus to the tarsus. Sorry. So you can suture. So this is after elevation. This is our lower eyelid flap. This has been hitched onto the advancing edge of our cheek rotation flap, which will be raised in the supraspinatus plane. And when this cheek rotation flap is coming medially, this corner hinge will be coming towards the medial side. From here, when we are putting it on the upper eyelid, we'll get the lash margin facing downwards. So can you see here? This is after completion of the reconstruction. We have divided the pedicle, and this is the lady. So some amount of edema is there, but you can see that the flap has survived. And there is barely anything to be seen over the cheek also, except for some ecchymosis, right? So that is about the lid switch flap. Then, like Shravan said, his first plan was a Cutler Beard flap. This was described by Cutler and Beard, Norman Cutler and Crowell Beard in 1955. That's 2 decades earlier than the other flaps also. This is his drawings. So basically, I think we have already described how we are going to do this. We are going 4 millimeters below the lower eyelid, putting the transverse incision, then the vertical incisions. We are raising the skin, the orbicularis muscle, and the conjunctiva. And then we are passing this underneath the lower eyelid bridge and suturing it onto the free margin. And here they have put one graft. So this graft is, it can be any graft. So free cartilage can be put here because both these split conjunctiva as well as the orbicularis, these are vascular layers. So you can sandwich the free graft that you're putting here and suture it like that. Or maybe you can take a piece of concha from posterior concha, the skin and the cartilage can be taken, you can put it here, or any sort of structural support. You can either put it primarily or you can put it secondarily. And then when you're dividing, remember to bring the extra conjunctiva and turn it and suture it on the lid margins also. So this is a Cutler Beard. We have raised it like this underneath the bridge. So this is after suturing. So the problem is that the eye will be completely occluded. Okay, so if it is a monoocular eye, so one eye only is having vision, this is not advised in such people. This is the problem with Cutler Beard. You know, this we have done without. This is an example of the one which we have done without a cartilage support. To see what is happening, there will be some amount of retraction and there is an irregularity and absence of support on the lash margin. So it's the main problem that happens with the Cutler Beard. So in this case, we have given a secondary conchal graft. instead of that, there are other modifications also. So myriads of things have been done to increase the support. This is another one. Here we have taken conchal cartilage along with the skin and put it over the, this is the skin of the conchal cartilage also. And such things can be done primarily also. Then we were discussing about the lateral forehead for upper eyelid. So lateral forehead is never an ideal structure because the tissues are so thick. We don't want it to be so heavy. But this was a recurrent meibomian carcinoma. I think this was a third recurrence which was sent to us. So we had to do a very wide excision. And when we did a wide excision, it became a total eyelid resection. And for that, we didn't have any other option except to take a lateral forehead. We had to put a graft here, which is again anesthetic. And like Nanduma sir said, there is a raising of the eyebrow also in this side. But we had remnants of levator here, so we had hitched up this heavy construct onto the levator, and she is barely able to open up the eye so that she can see through this. And after that, she has completed chemo and radiation also. So this is how she looks after that. Okay. Then about the options for the lower eyelid. Like for upper eyelid, there are several options for the lower eyelids also. So I think we have mentioned the names of all these things in our previous discussion. So we can do a direct closure, the pentagonal excision. Again, staggering of the skin we usually give so that the straight line notching doesn't happen. Then tensile flap variations, we already saw tensile flap earlier. And what, according to the tensile, the mathematical calculation is that 1.5 times of gain of length can be given by using the tensile flap, right? And people have modified it like a rectangular advancement, which is called a Rees. And then there is Imrie. Imrie gave a straight line with a triangle, Burroughs triangle. Then Imrie was also the first person who has described the cheek rotations before Mustade. And the Mustade's modification, all these things are there. So this is a tensile flap for the lower eyelid. Right? And here we had to divide the lateral canthal tendon. This is a Imrie. It is a straight line because we had a lot of laxity of tissues. So it was easier to bring in tissues in this case. We can see that the lateral half here is not having lashes. But in an older individual, I don't think it will be a problem at all. Then there are the multiples of cheek rotation flap. And cheek rotation, I think everybody knows that we have to raise it. This is a Mustade flap. We raise it above the level of the lateral canthus. And we can go into the preauricular skin crease and even into the neck. And then even cervical humeral extension can be given to cheek rotation flap. Usually we take it as a supras mass, and any amount of extension of this is possible. So this is one which is coming medially. There will be a dog ear in the nasolabial area, which we will be able to adjust also. So this was for a vascular malformation. We had to do a pre-op embolization in this case. We thought cheek rotation might not be enough because the nose also had to be excised. So we had planned some globular flap also, but this came with the cheek rotation itself. Then again, a more larger defect, larger cheek rotation, we could extend it. We can see some pin cushioning that is happening in the post-op period, but because it's inferiorly draining, it shouldn't be a problem. Then McGregor, the difference was that he had a Z-plasty in the lateral canthal area. And like earlier Sandeep had said, any of these flaps, they will always have a tendency to sag down under gravity. So it is very imperative that you fix it onto the lateral orbital wall. This is another cheek rotation one. Again, older individual, more laxity. Then tripier flap. So tripier is a musculocutaneous flap. It is just the anterior lamellae. It is taken from the upper eyelid. It can be taken from upper eyelid or it can be taken from lower eyelid. It can be unilateral or it can be bilateral. If it is taken as bilateral, it will be like a bucket handle and it will require division in the second stage and resuturing. So here for the lower eyelid defect, we have taken from the upper eyelid and the suture will be along the supratarsal fold. And here for the lining, Usually with tripea, people have put buccal mucosa, but this will lead on to ectropion later. So we had put a septal mucoperichondrium here. So it is staying. Maybe after edema, we'll have to see if there is any lateral ectropion, and we'll have to tighten the lid also. Right? And there are different modifications for that, which you can read. This is your Fricke flap. So Fricke flap is based upon the superficial temporal blood vessels. It is taken from the forehead. It is quite a thick flap. Okay, so usually we don't prefer that. And like Sir was saying that this can lead to elevation of the eyebrow, but we usually fix it onto the deeper tissues to the periosteum so that the eyebrow doesn't migrate upwards. But as you can see, this is very heavy. But for lower eyelid, it shouldn't be a problem. Of course, we have to put some posterior lamellae reconstruction like buccal mucosa or maybe palatal mucoperiosteum for this also. This is some of the recent upper eyelid defect flaps that have been described. This article came in 2020. A 10-year review has been done. So again, the basic reconstruction followed are the same, but some kind of modifications have been made by different people. So if you're interested, you can go through that also. And one particular one is by Vadani in 2018. They have used acellular dermal allografts also for posterior lamella, and that's they are keeping it directly in contact with the globe without any corneal abrasions and all. So that is one prospect which we'll have to explore later. Finally, reconstruction to the canthal region. Lateral canthal, again, we are happy because we have the temporal area, we have the forehead, we have the cheek area. So any of your usual flaps, Limburg, of course, we need lateral canthal reconstruction here. Then you can have the malar transposition. Then we can have bilobe flap from the forehead because she has got nearly cadaverous kind of very thin kind of skin. So Zimani, Zitterle modifications of your bilobe flap can be used in this area. Medial canthal reconstruction is a little bit more difficult, I would say, because one thing is we found that the medial canthal area malignancies, especially when they are recurrent malignancy, like in this lady, it was extending into the orbit. So frozen section control will usually be required in such cases. And even with that, it was a large defect. And we had to take this forehead and split it into two and give it for upper and lower eyelid. And put a mucosal graft also inside. So I'm not saying it is a good reconstruction because there's a lot of laxity in the lower eyelid also, which we'll have to do later, right? Then there is something called as a laissez-faire. A laissez-faire is French, and this term comes from economics actually. In France, it means let do or do not do anything. So it is a capitalist mentality where government is not supposed to interfere with business, right? Let whatever these companies and corporates are doing, let them do. So like that, when it is a policy of non-interference, when there is a raw area of the medial canthus which is not exposing the bone, it can be allowed to granulate and heal by itself without much secondary problems, right? But if it is exposing the bone, then you have to put a flap. And then, of course, you have to reconstruct the medial canthus also. Then you have the other options like glabellar flap, which can be used in this area, and a median forehead flap also. So in all these, when you are changing the tissue from the periorbita to the forehead, you see that the tissue becomes very thicker. Over the time, this will also settle, but not to the same extent as the eyelid tissues. So aesthetically, these are a little bit of a problem. So coming to post-operative sequelae, right? So something like this, when you are doing without keeping in mind the anatomy and the functions, and this is what is going to happen. So whatever is there in this list, that will be here. So notching, anesthetic scars, retraction, granulations, rubbing on the cornea, chemosis, symgliflozin, all these things have happened because the person who has done the primary repair, we're not mindful about the problem. We don't know what, maybe he had other injuries also. So this is a kind of problem, and he will definitely have a problem of blockage of the lacrimal system also. So the correction of this is by multiple Z plastics, putting every piece of the jigsaw in its normal place. But the scar is always there. So it would have been much better if you had tackled it in the primary sitting itself. Right? So that is why we should be aware of the complications that can happen. Most important of them is hemorrhage, because it's very vascular tissue. Even if you're giving adrenaline saline infiltration, you know that it will bleed like anything. And if you're going deeper to the orbital septum, there is the possibility of retroorbital hemorrhage, which you have to look for in the postoperative period. And infections are less. Dehiscences can happen if your tensioning is too high. Flap or graft failure, corneal ulcers can happen, and all these notching trichiasis, ptosis, heavy eyelid, diplopia, dystopia, all these can happen. So sometimes we might have to, this might was a trauma and somebody has put a flap like this and the child is having ectropion. So we were trying to do a scar revision only so that he could close his eyelid, but he definitely requires a lot of corrections later. And this is another problem, laterocanthal dehiscence that happened. In these cases, simply closing this will not help because the lid has remained outside. Conjunctiva is also stretched, so lateral strip surgeries. And then there are different techniques of laterocanthal reconstruction and all that we'll also have to do. Because there are some people who just ask for some aesthetic concerns alone, like supraorbital fat atrophy, you can do fat grafting, like baggy eyelid corrections. There also it is important to know about the fat pads, orbital fat pad, where to open the orbital septum and all. This we had published dermatochalasis as a part of Touraine Solenti-Gold syndrome. So here we have done a brow lift, and that has itself improved the appearance of the eye. Recently, what has happened? Lot of modifications of the flap, changes in the basic principles have happened. Islanded flaps like this, bipedical flap from upper to lower area, and all have been described. You can go through that. Then, of course, acellular dermal allograft have been used. Tarsal bioengineering is going on with collagen copolymers, and some people have used Medpore or other implants instead of tarsus, but extrusion rates are high, noticeably high, and naso-orbital navigation, all these things can happen. So, concluding, eyelids are quite important, right? They are important functionally, for vision-wise, for expressions, everything. And even a little tilt of the eyebrow can rock a nation, as we've seen some years back. So it goes without saying that we should give the utmost care for eyelid reconstruction. And to give the utmost care while reconstructing, it is quite important that we know about the structure, anatomy, and the different options that are available, and use them according to the defect, customize it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Shrija. It was a fantastic presentation. This presentation is like one presentation that I think everyone, and not only postgraduate, anyone who's actually going to do eyelid reconstruction, if he's not doing it on a regular basis, I think he will be actually seeing this particular talk before doing it. So it was